All right, I want to talk about the college football playoffs in general, not any specific games. We'll get to that later today. Later in the week, we'll do the game breakdowns and previews and predictions about the actual playoff games, which start this Friday night. I want to talk about the playoff structure, what we have, how we got here, what's working, what's not working, what do we need to change, what doesn't need to change, what do we need to add, what do we need to take away, all of that. And I talked a little bit about this in a video the other day, but I want to reemphasize this because I still feel like there's some people who are getting a couple of things confused here. The playoff committee does not decide the seeding of the teams. And this is a big area of confusion because you see the rankings every week. They come out every Tuesday for the last 5 or 6 weeks of the season. And then the Sunday after conference championship game, the playoff committee puts out their final rankings. But then you see the playoff bracket and the seeding, and it doesn't match up with what you see in the rankings. So it's by nature confusing. All the playoff committee is doing every week when they sit in that room and watch the games and meet and vote and put their ranking out, all they're doing is ranking teams 1 through 25. That's it. It has nothing to do with seeding. The seeding is not their job or their responsibility. All they're to do is to rank the top 25 teams. The seeding, the actual playoff structure, which starts this weekend, Friday night, with Notre Dame and Indiana, that was agreed to over a year ago in a meeting by all 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. The current 4-team playoff contract was coming to an end after the 2023 season, and they needed to negotiate a new playoff structure. And this is the structure they agreed upon. Again, all 10 conference commissioners. Now, there's only 9 conferences now, but the Pac-12 still existed back then. So you had all 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. They sat in a room over a period of months, and they came up with the 12-team playoff seeding structure that we're seeing unfold now. And what they came up with is we're going to have the playoff committee rank the teams 1 through 25. But we're not just going to take the top 12 teams and put them into the playoff. That's not what we're going to do. That would have been the simplest possible thing to do, because then the rankings that we see 1 through 12 would translate directly to the brackets that we're seeing now with the playoffs. But that's not what they did. They, of course, came up and added the sort of extra element of, well, we're going to guarantee that the 5 highest ranked conference champions get a playoff spot regardless of where they're ranked by the playoff committee, right? The 4 highest ranked conference champions are going to be ranked 1 through 4, seeded 1 through 4, regardless of what they're ranked. And the 5th highest ranked conference champion is going to be guaranteed a spot 5 through 12, seeding wise, regardless of what they're ranked. So it gets very confusing, right? To the average idiot like me. So keeping all that in mind, when you look at the final playoff ranking by the committee, which again has nothing to do with how the playoffs were seeded or structured. That was all decided over a year ago by the 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. You look at the final rankings, it doesn't just cut off at 12 and you say, okay, these are our 12 playoff teams. Now go play a 12-team playoff. That would have been simpler. It doesn't work that way. Part of the reason they didn't want it to work that way is because of what happened to Florida State last year, getting left out of the playoffs. None of the 10 conferences that met wanted to potentially face a situation where their conference champion was left out. So they worked in this thing where 4 of the conference champions are guaranteed seeds 1 through 4, and the 5th highest ranked conference champion is guaranteed a spot somewhere 5 through 12. So what did that mean this season as we watched this play out? This ranking came out the Sunday after the conference championship games, and you can see that Alabama is 11th. So the playoff committee thinks Alabama is one of the top 12 teams. They have them ranked at 11, okay? Alabama's not in the playoffs, though, because a team that won the conference, Clemson, is ranked outside the top 12. And according to the 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame, Clemson has to be guaranteed a spot in the playoff because they're one of the highest ranked, one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions. So when you go to seed the playoffs, you've got to make room for Clemson, who's at 16 in the rankings. You have to make room for them in the top 12. So how do you do that? Well, you would bump out the team that was ranked 12th. That would be Arizona State. Well, you can't bump out Arizona State because they also won a conference. So they're also guaranteed a spot somewhere in the 12. So you go up to the next available team. That's Alabama. Alabama gets bumped out. Not because the committee didn't think Alabama was one of the 12 best teams. In fact, the committee clearly did think Alabama was one of the best 12 teams. They have them ranked 11th. But because of the playoff structure that was agreed to by the 10 conference commissioners, including, by the way, the commissioner of the SEC, who is currently complaining about the structure of the playoffs, they all agreed to this. They all agreed to it. And so now we've got a confusing situation here where you look at the top four and you go, oh, the top four teams, according to the committee, are Oregon, Georgia, Texas, and Penn State. Okay, that must be the top four seeds. Well, no, Oregon is the 1 seed because they won the Big Ten. Georgia is the 2 seed because they won the SEC. But Texas is not actually the 3 seed because we have to have a conference champion here. So you got to go all the way down to Boise State, who the committee says is the 9th best team, and you have to move them up to 3rd for seeding purposes. Oh, well, that must bump Texas to 4. Well, nope, can't bump Texas to 4 because you have to have another conference champion at 4. Well, we got to go all the way down here to 12 to find another conference champion. So the 12 seed gets, or not the 12 seed, I'm sorry. The 12th best team, according to the playoff committee, Arizona State, gets moved way up to number 4 in the seeding. The 11th best team, according to the committee, Alabama, gets moved out of the playoffs entirely to make room for the 16th best team, according to the committee. If this sounds confusing, it's because it is. It's extremely confusing, okay? But here's my point I want to make here. You can't burn the whole thing down because you think the 13th, 14th, 15th, whatever team, the first team out, the second team out, whether that's Bama, Miami, Ole Miss, South Carolina, whatever, because you think they should have been in and some other team should have been out. You can't burn the whole system down because you feel that way or a group of people feel that way. Why can't you burn the whole system down because of that? Because every single year there are teams in that same situation. You go back to the 4-team playoff, even if you just go back to last year, 2023, right? 4-team playoff. Florida State 5th. A lot of people thought Florida State should have been in. Georgia 6 last year. A lot of people thought Georgia should have been in. Neither got in. Go back the year before that, 2022. 2022. Bama thought they should have been in 2022. They didn't get in. We all remember Nick Saban, right? Going on Fox at halftime of the Pac-12 championship game on Friday night, 2 days before the final playoff rankings were coming out. Nick Saban goes on Fox at halftime of the Pac-12 championship game and gives this big, long speech about how Alabama deserves and needs to and should be in the playoffs, right? Y'all remember that, right? They didn't get in. And you can go back every year over the 4-team playoff and you can find people that thought the 5th team and the 6th team should have been in. It's no different now that we're in a 12-team, right? Alabama's the first team out of the 12-team playoff. They think they should be in. Miami's got a better record than Alabama. They're the 2nd team out. Miami thinks they should be in, ahead of Bama. South Carolina, same amount of losses as Bama, less losses than Miami. They even lost to Bama, but they still think they should be in because they think they're playing better now than Bama. Ole Miss, the list, it goes on and on. And next year will be the same thing. Whoever the first team out is, the second team out, the third team out, there's going to be people that think those teams should be in over some other team that is in. So you can't burn the whole thing down because you've got a couple of fan bases who feel like they got slighted. Because if you do that, you're going to burn the whole thing down every single year. Every single year. So you can't do that. So what can you do? What can you fix about the college football playoff? Well, I think the first thing we need to fix about the playoff, they need to do a better job of explaining the difference between the ranking and the seeding. I am still getting comments every single day here, Twitter, wherever, for people blaming the playoff committee for the seeding structure. You know, the playoff committee got it wrong. They shouldn't have had the 5 conference champion. That's got nothing to do with the playoff committee. Nothing. The playoff committee works at the discretion of the conference commissioners. The conference commissioners put the playoff committee together just to rank the teams. The structure of the 12-team playoff was decided by the conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. And you know the playoff structure that I'm talking about, the one that the one that we have now. Okay? So you look at these first round games, and again, you know, Oregon at 1, Georgia at 2, Boise at 3, even though they were ranked 9th. These are the seedings, not the rankings. So you see the difference between ranking and seeding, right? The playoff committee ranked the teams. The playoff committee said Alabama was the 11th best team. Well, SMU has the 11th seed. So it's very confusing. It's extremely confusing. And what causes it is the fact that you have to have 5 conference champions in the playoffs no matter what. And 4 of those conference champions have to have the 1 through 4 seed. The 5th conference champion gets seeded somewhere 5 to 12. Because of that, any year under this system that you have one of the 5 highest ranked conference champions finished ranked outside of the playoff committee's final top 12, you're going to have one of those teams at least bumped out of the playoffs. Potentially 2. You could very easily have had 2 teams bumped out this year. Had Boise State, let's say Boise State had finished ranked 14th, right? And Clemson at 16th. You'd have had to move both Boise State and Clemson into the 12 seeding. So you would have had to remove 2 teams from the top 12. Does that make sense what I'm saying? This is where a lot of the problem and confusion lies, and I think where there are some things that can actually be fixed here. It's ridiculous that Oregon, the only undefeated team in the country, earns a bye week. That's great. But because of the way the seeding works, they've got one of the most difficult paths to a potential national title. Instead of the way it should be, which is that Oregon should have one of the easiest. Oregon's got to play the winner of Ohio State, Tennessee. Boise State, a group of 5 team, gets to play the winner of SMU, Penn State. Now, who would you rather be here? Would you rather be Oregon and have to play the winner of Tennessee, Ohio State? Or would you rather be Boise State and have to play the winner of SMU and Penn State? The answer is obvious. You'd rather be Boise State. Boise State is receiving a bigger reward for the 3 seed than Oregon is as the 1 seed. What makes it even worse is that Oregon is not only the 1 seed, they were ranked 1. So the committee thinks they are the best team and they have the 1 seed. Boise State was ranked 9th by the committee. The committee thinks they're the 9th best team, but because of the structure, and again, this is not the fault of the playoff committee. The structure of the seeding was put into place by the 10 conference commissioners and the athletic director of Notre Dame. But because of the playoff structure that exists, Boise State, who's ranked 9th, gets a 3 seed. And they get to play the winner of the 6 and the 11, which is SMU and Penn State. Whereas Oregon has to face the winner of the 8 and the 9, which is Tennessee and Ohio State. On top of that, if Oregon beats Tennessee or Ohio State here in the second round, what's their reward for that? Well, probably playing Texas, Arizona State, or Clemson. Georgia gets the winner of Indiana, Notre Dame, and then they will have to play whoever comes out of this Boise State, Penn State, SMU bracket. Georgia's got a much better path here than Oregon. Doesn't mean Georgia will win the games and make it. But it's an easier road to get here than what Oregon has. And this is wrong. They have to fix the seeding. If you want to guarantee that conference champions get into the 12-team playoff, which I feel like that is what they want because of what happened last year to Florida State. Well, let's be real. Under a 4-team playoff structure that we had, one of the conference champions at least was left out every single year because at the time you had 5 major conferences and 4 playoff spots. Now, there were several years where multiple Power 5 conferences got left out. Notre Dame made it, so now you're down to 2 getting left out. Cincinnati made it 1 year, so now you got 2 out. The SEC gets 2 teams in, so now you got 2 Power 5 conferences that didn't make it. So all these commissioners got together and they're like, we don't want any of that to happen again. So we're going to put in this guarantee that if you win your conference, you're in the playoffs. So I don't think that is going away. I don't think the guaranteed playoff spot for the 4 or 5 highest ranked champions, I don't think that's going away. What I do think could potentially be changed, and what I do think would help a lot, is not to guarantee those conference champions a 1 through 4 seed. Seed them the same that they're ranked. And the only exception you would make to that, let me put the rankings back up on the screen. So the only exception you would have to make would be if one of the conference champions was ranked outside the top 12, you would have to move them into the top 12 for seeding purposes, but not into the top 4. So, for example, Boise State, who the committee says is the 9th best team, they would be seeded 9th, not 3rd. Clemson, who is the 16th, would be 12. Arizona State would not be 4th. You wouldn't move Arizona State from 12 to 4. You'd move them up 1 spot in this scenario to 11 to make room for Clemson at 12. Now, this would still eliminate Bama from the conversation because you have to have the 5 conference champions in the top 12. But again, whether I think, you think, or anybody else thinks that Bama should be in or is one of the best 12 or would be favored over this many teams that made the playoffs, all of that is irrelevant because every single year there's going to be a team that's 13 seeding wise, right? Every year. So we can't just burn the whole thing to the ground because the 13th team thinks they deserve to be in, because that's a never-ending cycle. But I do think you can fix some of the seeding issues here. Some of the things that I like about the playoff structure. I like the bye. I don't have a problem with buys. I have a problem right now with who's getting the buys. I think the 4 highest ranked teams. So in this case, these 4 teams should have got a bye. Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Penn State. These 4 teams should have had buys. Notre Dame, it should have been the 5. They would play the 12 seed, which would actually be Clemson. Remember, because Clemson's guaranteed a spot as a conference winner. So if they just seeded them the same way they're ranked, with the exception of moving conference winners into the top 12, you would have Notre Dame at 5 versus Clemson at 12. Arizona State would move up to 11 and Bama would be out. So you would have number 11, Arizona State, on the road at number 6, Ohio State. You'd have number 10, SMU, on the road at number 7, Tennessee. And you'd have number 9, Boise State, on the road at number 8, Indiana. That is a much more fair way to seed the playoffs based on how good the committee thinks these teams are, because the ranking is an indication of how good they think they are. Once you reseed them and bump up all these conference champions into the top 4, moving Arizona State from 12 to 4 is ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. And I like Arizona State. They're fun to watch. I think Arizona State can win a game or 2 in the playoffs. They're fun to watch. But what I think should be irrelevant, a committee of 13 people thinks Arizona State's the 12th best team, but because of the seeding structure, they get moved all the way up to 4th. Boise moves from 9 to 3rd. Texas moves from 3rd all the way down to what did Texas ended up being ranked? Texas moves from 3rd down to 5th. Penn State moves from 4 to 6. So you got some teams moving down, some teams moving up. It's just a giant mess. It's a giant mess. It's more confusing and complicated than it needs to be because of the difference between rankings and seeding. They haven't done a good job of explaining that to people and why is a team ranked here but seeded here, or ranked here but seeded here. They haven't done a good enough job explaining that. Giving the conference champions, bumping the conference champions up 1 through 4, bad idea. Now they need to get rid of that. But tearing the whole thing down because the 13th fan base is mad. This year it's Bama. Next year it'll be somebody else. That I disagree with, because you're just tearing it down every year then. Because some fan base is going to be mad every single year. Anyway, that's my thoughts on it. Have a good morning.